Hi everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. I mentioned in my recent update that I would be looking at the EU, and I'm going to be doing that today, and also a very brief look at the euro, just to give you some thoughts about what we may be seeing in the coming weeks and years, because there's a lot of activation in the EU chart. And so I'm going to be sharing charts for a lot of this period, but I hope you're going to find it helpful. I'm going to be as clear as I can in going through these. So this is the chart for the EU, which was set up in November 1993, 1 minute past midnight in Brussels. And what is of interest here is that Saturn, in its so-called natal place, is receiving a transit from orbiting Saturn here, which is going to get to this same place very, very soon into really turn of the year. And this is known as the Saturn Return. So it takes 29.5 years essentially. And this is a very important period for a person or a country or a group of countries, because it's the kind of reality check. Okay, how have we done? How far have we come? In this case, in building a successful EU, how good does it look? And areas that are going to be particularly highlighted, I think, apart from currencies, which I'll go on to, Saturn, because it rules Capricorn, rules this 6th house, which is to do with employment in a country's chart or group of countries. So I think that's going to be very highlighted in the coming months. Employment issues. But I've mentioned in previous videos that what is very important as well is that Saturn, transiting Saturn, is currently at 19 of Aquarius. It's coming back to 18. Transiting Uranus is at 18 of Taurus. So they are forming this very important square that I've been talking about for 2 years now, really, almost. But what that is doing is forming a T-square with the ascendant of this chart. And the ascendant in a person's chart, a country's chart, is their identity, how they're perceived in the world. It's their identity. So this really does suggest some quite rapid Uranus and radical Uranus changes to the identity of the EU. Of interest, transiting Uranus is gradually going to be moving on to that moon. The moon in mundane astrology represents the people. Doesn't get there really till about June 2024. However, of note, if I can refer back to Australia's chart, they have their moon at 20 of Taurus. So when we have our total lunar eclipse on the 8th of November, that is going to very much aspect the moon, the people in Australia, and Uranus is quite rebellious, revolutionary, rebellious energy, demands for change, more freedom, etc. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. So that's one of the important things to note in the EU chart. And we have this already. I mean, this is already happening, because that square becomes exact again by degree in late September and also the first week of October, but we're going to feel that energy all the way through into early November. So we're right in it now. We're right in that energy. Another thing we're right into is the eclipse energy, because we have a solar eclipse on the 25th of October at 2 degrees of Scorpio. That is exactly to the minute on the IC, the base of the chart of the EU. This is the foundation, if you like. It's the land, it's the foundation of the EU as a legal constitution. This is what is known as a south node eclipse, because every eclipse, the moon has to either be closest to the north node, in terms of we're looking forwards to the future in a bigger way, or close to the south node. In this case, it's close to the south node. So this is a lot about releasing the old. The south node is about our collective past and what we have to release in order to move more fully forwards. So this is very interesting, because again, that solar eclipse, I would say, although it's a little wide, I'd say that's conjunct the sun. The sun is the ruler of the identity, ruler of the chart, ruler of the identity of the EU. So again, that same message is reiterated, and it's also conjunct Jupiter, which rules the fifth house of financial speculation. So that suggests there's going to be some kind of change in the financial speculation, the investment of the currency of the EU. Now, Scorpio South Node it's many things, really. If Taurus, which this is part of an axis, it isn't just one end of the axis, it is an axis. So the North Node in Taurus in this chart is to do with the leadership and the government of the EU. But in general, it's to do with natural resources, our food supplies, our agriculture. Look at what's been happening in the Netherlands with the farmers recently. I'm sure you're aware of that. The South Node in Scorpio, this is to do with banking, investments, mortgages, debts, loans. It's very much to do with the insurance industry as well, Scorpio. Many of you may be aware that the insurance industry is extremely stressed by many, many claims right now. You may be aware of that. It's also ruled by Pluto, Scorpio, so it's to do with digging deep. Pluto, lord of the underworld. So it's digging deep. It can be revealing things in this solar eclipse that are certainly to do with secrets, Scorpio, but underground, underhand. Scorpio is also linked, because of its underground connotation, is linked to oil and gas and that kind of thing. And you're probably all very aware of the radical changes recently for the EU with such resources. There's been a kind of radical cut-off of gas from Russia. So those are things that are very important to note. The other thing I would say about Scorpio is often there are issues around trust and betrayal that come to light at the times of eclipses or big full moons. Here it's an eclipse. What also suggests there are going to be issues around the value of the currency is not only that the solar eclipse is conjunct Jupiter, which rules the fifth house, but also transiting Pluto. This is my symbol for Pluto, which is retrograde, is square, exactly square to that Jupiter. So that suggests some fundamental change in the financial speculation of the currency of the EU, if you follow my translation of the symbolism very literally. Another thing to note, looking down the timeline, is that the North Node is going to come to this point 2 of Taurus next June, and the South Node is going to come back to this point, obviously at the same point because it's an axis. That could be another very pivotal time for the EU, but I would strongly suggest that in the coming weeks and months, we are likely to see some really quite radical change in the leadership and the governance and the wealth, perhaps, the currency value, let's say, of the EU. Another thing I want to say as well, which I may not have mentioned fully enough, I know I've mentioned it in the past, but maybe not fully enough, is that any hard aspects between Saturn and Uranus, this is a square, as I've talked about many times, 90-degree angle, any hard aspects historically are very linked to financial turbulence. For instance, we had an opposition between these planets that was building in September 2008. And that was, as you well know, everybody remembers the financial turbulence in September 2008, the financial crash. And within a short period of time, almost 50% was wiped off the Dow Jones index. So, and that worldwide banking crisis that came about at that time really led to the Arab Spring, which began, it was really building all the way through to April 2011, but it was set up by a lot of social unrest because of the economic strains, the financial strains of 2008 that had been set up in 2008 in the worldwide banking crisis. And so, just be aware of that history, because historically it is very linked to financial turbulence, as I say, and it's very much the clash of the old and the new. And so we are seeing old systems collapsing. Again, talked about that hundreds of times, but it isn't just that. New systems are being born alongside. The two processes are happening side by side. And I'm going to be speaking with Catherine McBean in a couple of days' time to interview her about her new initiative, the People's Food and Farming Alliance, which is another brilliant example of Uranian Aquarius energy moving forwards into our future, which is why I'm so excited to talk to her about this. But hope that's clear on the EU chart. Just one final thing. Scorpio is a lot to do with detoxing financially, getting corruption out of banking systems, financial structures of all kinds. It's also to do with our personal detoxing. I think there's a lot of that going on right now too. So be aware that that is part of the picture. Just one final thing, and it's not something I often mention, but this black line here, which is a quindicile, not very often used, but very, very important, 165-degree aspect, is an aspect of obsession. An aspect of obsession. So when we have this Saturn return happening, which is imminent now for the EU, it is linked in some kind of obsessive or upheaval way to issues around health, illness, wellness, etc. I think that's very important. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the EU chart. And now let's look at the Euro chart, because of course this is part of the picture. So Euro was birthed 1st of Jan 1999, 1 minute past midnight again in Brussels. What is of interest here is that transiting Pluto, again this is my symbol for Pluto, is conjunct Venus. Now Venus always has the generalized meaning of value, currencies in general, but very much in the chart of the euro, this I think is about the value of the euro, particularly because Venus here is ruling the second house, and the second house traditionally is about value. It also, in its rulership of Taurus, is ruling this ninth house of foreign relationships and foreign investment, if you like. So that is super activated. And Pluto transits tend to bring about permanent changes, much as eclipses do as well, actually. Permanent changes to, in this case, potentially the value of the euro. It'll be interesting to see what unfolds. The other thing which is of note is that transiting Mars is going to be moving through Gemini, as I've mentioned in the last couple of updates, until March next year. So this whole ninth house, foreign relations and perhaps foreign investment in the euro, is super energized and activated at this time. There's going to be a lot of activity around that area, one way or another. And when Mars comes to station, retrograde, which is when a planet's symbolism is always magnified, that happens right at the end of October. I think it's the 30th of October. It is conjunct the moon in the chart of the euro. Now, the moon normally in mundane astrology represents the people, but here we're looking at the chart of a currency. And the moon rules Cancer, so this is the co-ruler of the 10th house. So here we're looking at the status of the euro. The status and reputation of the euro, that's 10th house. So that's very interesting. So that will be super activated at the end of October, and then Mars moves retrograde and then comes back again to this point in March next year. So again, there is this sense of, something that is imminent that suggests some big financial shifts, that we are already into the energy of these, because it's starting in October with the eclipses, etc., as I've described, but it is going to kind of ricochet on for the next few months as well. So I expect a lot of changes happening in the euro. I expect changes not only in the whole situation with natural resources and the currency, but also with the government, the leadership of the EU, because that solar eclipse at 2 degrees of Scorpio is obviously at the aspecting the 2 degrees of Taurus, which is the midheaven of the EU. And the midheaven is the leadership and the government of that, in this case, group of countries for the EU. So over the coming months, I expect to see some quite radical shifts in the EU. The other thing, looking further down the pipeline, is down the timeline. If I'm looking to 2025, transiting Neptune is going to be here, opposing the identity of the euro, and also squaring the midheaven, which here is the status of the euro. Neptune has a dissolving effect, it's like an undertow. Think of Neptune, Lord of the Sea, and it's when the waves pull back and there's this kind of undertow effect. It has a dissolving, a weakening effect, if you like, on whatever it aspects. So I think that is also of note as we move forwards in these times. I think there's going to be a complete radical change in values in every sense. What we value as people versus what we valued in the past. I think money in many ways is not only going to go through massive changes, but our value of money is going to change. I think it's in many ways going to become much less important. We're going to be into sharing and community activities in a much bigger way. So our personal wealth, our personal ownership will become less dominant in our lives. And that's very clear to see astrologically. So I hope that's been helpful for you. Got into quite a lot of detail there. So maybe challenged some people who are beginner astrologers, but I hope for the more experienced of you, it's been helpful. So a lot to come in these next couple of months. But don't just think about the collapse of the old systems, which is inevitable and happening. Focus on what is being birthed, as I say. Focus on many things that are being birthed from the grassroots up. And again, my conversation with Catherine McBean this week with the People's Food and Farming Alliance being launched this month is another really exciting example of these two processes happening at the same time. As the old systems collapse, the new are already being birthed. So hope that's helped you. God bless, and stay on your eagle's perch. We're going to be seeing a lot of change in the coming weeks and months. Bye for now.